The Game had the world in his hands. Dr. Dre's co-sign, 50 Cent's backing, and a platinum debut. But years of beef, lawsuits, and nonstop controversy turned him from West Coast savior to one of the most hated rappers alive. This is the full story nobody's telling.
I'm the biggest rapper in the world.
Are you the biggest rapper?
I am. Literally.
In which, like?
All of them.
The Game. Are you the biggest rapper? How is The Game the biggest rapper in the world?
Number one, I'm just lyrically better than everybody else. And again, this is how I feel about myself.
Yourself.
Anybody watching this could say, "Oh no, this person's better. This person's better." Who's your best rapper?
I think the best rapper is Hov.
If we're judging on everything, then I would agree with you.
Sure.
I would say Hov too. But as far as like the best rapper in the world, like I'm the best rapper in the world.
The story of The Game is wild from the very beginning because his come up in the rap world was never smooth, never quiet, and definitely never drama-free.
JC! I said JC! You old ass. Too much 50 Cent, not enough West Coast rap. 50 Cent.
When have you ever heard an Eminem song in the club? I don't hear Eminem in the streets. I'm just a better rapper.
Born Jason Taylor out of Compton, he came out the gate with something to prove. This wasn't some regular rapper grinding for years underground. He had that early golden ticket when Dr. Dre noticed his potential and decided to bring him under the legendary Aftermath umbrella. That move alone set the streets on fire because in the early 2000s, anything Dre touched turned into platinum. The Game was supposed to be the next chosen one, the West Coast savior after years of silence following Tupac's passing. And for a while, it looked like he was living that prophecy. His debut album, The Documentary, dropped in 2005 and instantly flipped the industry upside down. Packed with Dre production, guest verses from 50 Cent and other G-Unit members, and radio-smashing singles like Hate It or Love It and How We Do, The Game had the kind of launch most rappers could only dream about. He wasn't just another rapper. He was supposed to be the guy who carried the West Coast on his back into a new era. But the shine didn't last long because with The Game, drama followed him like a shadow. The tension started with 50 Cent.
Too much 50 Cent, not enough West Coast rap. 50 Cent.
The man who not only helped pen some of The Game's biggest hits, but also gave him that stamp of approval through G-Unit. Instead of being grateful for that alley-oop, The Game started moving sideways. He wanted to separate himself, claiming he didn't need to ride G-Unit's coattails, but in hip-hop, ego and loyalty clashed hard, and this situation was the perfect storm. The falling out went public fast, with both camps throwing shots back and forth. 50 claimed he wrote major parts of How We Do and Hate It or Love It, basically saying The Game wouldn't even exist without him. Meanwhile, The Game shot back, saying he was holding his own weight and didn't owe anybody credit. This wasn't just a behind-the-scenes issue. It turned into one of the ugliest rap beefs of the 2000s. Diss tracks flew, crews clashed, and fans picked sides. What was supposed to be the biggest team in rap quickly collapsed, and The Game went from being Dre's golden student to hip-hop's loudest troublemaker. That moment became the first major reason why people started turning against him. Instead of being the West Coast savior, he was labeled a hothead who couldn't stay loyal and couldn't play the long game. And if that wasn't enough, The Game built his brand by picking fights with almost everybody in the industry. He took shots at Jay-Z, even though Jay was one of the most respected and powerful figures in music at the time.
JC! I said JC! You old ass.
He clowned Meek Mill, 50 Cent, Joe Budden, Yuckmouth, Lil Durk, and countless others. Some of those beefs made sense in the moment. Competition has always been part of hip-hop, but The Game made it his whole identity. Instead of fans focusing on his skills, they started seeing him as the guy who only stayed relevant by stirring the pot. And once you get that kind of rep, people stop respecting you for the music. They tune in just to watch the chaos. And the thing is, The Game's chaos wasn't only about music. His personal life and public image kept piling on problems that made people question everything about him. Allegations, lawsuits, and bad business deals became part of his brand. He got hit with accusations that dragged him into the courtroom more than once, including one case that cost him millions and even forced him to hand over ownership of his label. Every time he tried to bounce back musically, Another headline about legal trouble or unpaid debts popped up. It made him look messy, like he couldn't keep his empire together no matter how much talent he had. The industry runs on respect, and once promoters, labels, and business partners start viewing you as unstable, that respect vanishes fast. But the wildest part about the game's story is the contradiction. On one hand, he's undeniably one of the most talented lyricists of his era. Nobody can really question his ability to rap, his pen game, his storytelling, his ability to craft an album full of street tales and West Coast pride. Yet on the other hand, his arrogance and nonstop beefs overshadowed everything. He painted himself as the realest in the game, but when people started pulling receipts and questioning his credibility in certain street situations, that tough guy image began to crack. Instead of being remembered as a top MC, he was being clowned as the rapper who always had something to say about everybody else, but couldn't control his own backyard. And that's what this video breaks down so vividly. How the game went from having the perfect setup, Dre's cosign, 50 Cent's backing, platinum hits, and the streets cheering him on, to slowly burning through every bridge he had. It wasn't one single mistake that made everybody hate him. It was the pattern. The constant wars, the messy money, the ego clashes, the questionable moves, and the endless need to be in the spotlight, even if it meant turning friends into enemies. The game is proof that raw talent can take you far, but if you don't protect your reputation and relationships, the industry will chew you up and spit you out. His rise and downfall became one of hip-hop's biggest cautionary tales, and we're only just getting into it. After the blow-up with 50 Cent and G-Unit, the game entered a new phase of his career, one that showed both his strengths and his biggest flaws. On one hand, he proved he could stand alone without the G-Unit machine. Albums like Doctor's Advocate and LAX had solid success, showing fans that the game still had the ability to drop hard-hitting tracks and represent the West Coast in a major way. He knew how to make songs that blended raw street energy with commercial appeal, and he kept name-dropping legends in almost every verse, cementing his role as a rap historian of sorts. But on the other hand, the way he moved outside the booth made it clear he thrived more on controversy than consistency. See, while a lot of rappers use beef as a temporary tool to boost hype, the game seemed addicted to it. He clashed with Ras Kass, took random shots at Jay-Z, and constantly reminded the world of his issues with 50. Even when the public started moving on, he kept reviving the drama. At one point, he even staged a peace treaty with G-Unit, only to go back to dissing them weeks later. That type of inconsistency made fans feel like they couldn't trust his word. One minute he's cool with someone, the next he's threatening them on wax. And when you burn that many bridges, sooner or later, people stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. But what really started to tilt the scales against him were the legal problems and financial hits. The most infamous one came from a lawsuit connected to his VH1 reality show, She Got Game. A contestant accused him of misconduct, and when the court ruled against him, it wasn't just a small fine. It was a massive judgment that forced him to give up ownership of his music label. That kind of L in the business world crushed his credibility because it showed that no matter how much money he flashed, his empire wasn't built to last. Fans started seeing him less as a boss and more as a cautionary tale. And in an industry where image is everything, that shift hurt him badly. And it wasn't just money or lawsuits that kept the hate flowing his way. The game also built a reputation for being contradictory. One day he'd preach loyalty to Dre and the West Coast. The next he'd be throwing shots at legends like Jay-Z for no reason. He'd boast about being the realest, but then get called out for clout chasing or exaggerating stories. His interviews didn't help either. He became known for dropping wild, sometimes reckless statements, often naming names that didn't need to be named. From talking about who he'd allegedly been with in the industry to claiming he wrote rhymes for other rappers, the game had a habit of spilling tea in ways that made him look messy rather than authentic. Fans started calling it name-dropping overload because every verse or interview felt like a checklist of celebrities. Instead of boosting his legacy, it started making him look desperate for attention. By this point, people in the industry weren't just side-eyeing him, they were actively avoiding him. Collaborations dried up, his beef-heavy persona overshadowed his skills, and the mainstream spotlight began dimming. He still had loyal fans, no doubt, but the general perception was shifting. The game wasn't the savior of the West anymore. He was the rapper who couldn't stop tripping over his own ego. And what's wild is that even when he dropped genuinely solid projects, like Jesus Piece in 2012, which many fans still call underrated, the conversation around him was never about the music. It was always about who he was beefing with, what lawsuit he lost, or what crazy thing he said in an interview. This is where the hate narrative really solidified. By constantly chasing conflict, the game trapped himself in an endless loop. If he wasn't dissing someone, people barely paid attention. But every diss chipped away at his credibility because he looked like the guy who couldn't exist without stirring the pot. And the more he leaned into that, the less people respected his actual artistry. The truth is, in hip hop, beef is supposed to add flavor. It's supposed to be a side dish, not the main course. For the game, it became the whole meal. At the same time, the new generation of rappers started rising. Artists like Kendrick Lamar came out of the same West Coast soil that the game once represented, but Kendrick did it without all the chaos. He kept the focus on his craft, his storytelling, and his movement. That contrast made the game look outdated, like the old head who couldn't adapt and kept relying on drama to stay relevant. Younger fans didn't connect to his constant feuds the same way the 2000s crowd did. Instead, they gravitated toward rappers who built movements bigger than beef. And that shift in the culture left the game looking like he was stuck in the past. So while his lyrical ability never left, his reputation took blow after blow. Every headline about a lawsuit, every new diss, every outrageous interview chipped away at his foundation. Instead of being known as one of the West's greatest, he became known as one of the most polarizing. Some still praised him as underrated and unfairly dismissed, while others straight up couldn't stand him anymore. And when the hate gets that strong, it's hard to bounce back, no matter how good the music might be. That's the twisted irony of the game's career. He always had the skill to be a legend, but his own moves kept him from reaching that level. And in hip-hop, where image and respect matter just as much as bars, that was enough to put him on the wrong side of history in a lot of people's eyes. By the time the 2010s rolled into the late 2010s and beyond, the game's career had become a mix of respect and ridicule, and that's what makes his story so complicated. On one side, hip-hop heads couldn't deny the catalog he built. Multiple platinum albums, tracks that still get spun in the clubs, and features with some of the biggest names in rap. He never lost his ability to spit raw, detailed rhymes that captured the essence of the streets. Even critics who didn't like him personally admitted that when the game is in the booth, he's a problem. But on the other side, his reputation outside of music dragged him down so much that people started ignoring the music altogether. It's like every time he dropped an album, there was already some headline or lawsuit or wild claim that overshadowed it. And let's not pretend like he didn't feed into that. The game seemed to enjoy keeping his name in people's mouths, whether it was through rap beefs or wild interviews. He'd go viral not for a track, but for saying something reckless on Instagram Live. He'd reveal details about relationships, throw shade at other rappers, or brag about situations that probably should have been left private. That type of oversharing created more haters than supporters because the culture started seeing him as a dude who was more invested in shock value than legacy. Even his habit of name dropping, which once made him sound like a hip-hop historian, became a running joke. Fans and rappers alike began mocking how every verse felt like a roll call of celebrities he'd crossed paths with. Instead of being seen as authentic, it came off like clout chasing, and that made the hate spread even more. The thing is, the game also got caught up in the shift of the rap industry itself. In the early 2000s, beef and bravado were the main fuel for attention. But by the 2010s, the game changed. Social media, streaming, and viral moments mattered just as much as bars. Rappers like Drake, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, and Future built fan bases that weren't dependent on beef. They created movements, cultural moments, and music that connected beyond drama. For the game, who thrived on constant conflict, this shift left him looking outdated. His formula of dropping an album tied to a bunch of beef headlines no longer worked. And when fans compared him to his peers, he came across as the guy who refused to evolve. That's another reason why Everyone Hates the Game became such a popular narrative. He was stuck playing by old rules in a new era. But to be real, the hate wasn't just about his rap strategy. It was also about his personal choices. From lawsuits to messy public fallouts, the game became his own worst enemy. Every time he made progress musically, he'd do something that pulled him right back into negativity. And when he got hit with that massive financial judgment from the lawsuit tied to She Got Game, it didn't just drain his pockets, it drained his credibility. Suddenly, the flashy cars, designer fits, and boss talk didn't hit the same because the public saw the reality. He was taking L's behind the scenes. Nothing kills a rap persona faster than when fans stop believing the image. For the game, that moment shifted him from being seen as a rap giant to being clowned as a rapper who couldn't manage his own empire. Still, it's impossible to tell the game's story without giving him credit. He kept the West Coast alive during a time when it desperately needed a voice. Without the game, there's a strong argument that the lane wouldn't have been open for artists like Kendrick Lamar to dominate later. He repped Compton unapologetically, and when you strip away the drama, his music has some of the hardest storytelling of his generation. Tracks like Dreams and Start From Scratch and Hate It or Love It are undeniable classics that remind people just how skilled he is. And even albums like The Documentary 2 showed that lyrically, he never fell off. That duality, the undeniable talent versus the constant chaos, is why his career is still debated to this day. But here's the truth the video makes clear. In hip-hop, legacy is about more than just music. It's about respect, relationships, and how you move in the industry. And the game, no matter how talented, burned too many bridges and created too many enemies. When fans think of him now, the first thing that comes to mind isn't his albums. It's the lawsuits, the feuds, the contradictions, and the endless controversy. That's why everyone hates the game. Not because he wasn't talented, but because he couldn't get out of his own way. So when you look back at the game's full story, it's a mix of brilliance and self-destruction. He had the perfect start, Dr. Dre's cosign, 50 Cent's backing, and a debut album that became an instant classic. But instead of building on that foundation, he spent years tearing it down with ego, drama, and reckless moves. He could have been remembered alongside the greats like Nas, Jay-Z, and Kendrick, but instead his name often comes up in conversations about wasted potential and controversy. The hate he gets isn't random. It's the result of years of choices that made people stop respecting him, even if they still respected the music. In the end, the game story is one of hip-hop's most cautionary tales. It shows that talent alone isn't enough. You need discipline, strategy, and the ability to grow with the culture. He had all the tools to be a legend, but the constant chaos turned him into one of the most polarizing rappers ever. And that's why when people talk about him today, they don't just say the game, the rapper. They say the game, the guy everyone has something to say about. That's the legacy he built for better or worse, and that's why this story still hits so hard.